1, 5, 4, 3. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the Global Theater, my name is Jerry Fielka. Today is December 21, 2021. This session is called Awake Winter Solstice. It's an honor and a pleasure, and we're thanking Rob Grant for hosting us today. We have Walter, we have Duncan, we have Peter, and we have Roy. Wow, what a lineup. So we just simply remember that the word wake is joined us together here because of the whatever you want to call it by James Joyce Finnegan's Wake. But it's interesting that the word wake can mean alert, it can mean a funeral, or it could mean a residual ripple, like after a boat you have a wake, which is like the resonating interval. Winter is the wet season, and it's actually studying it etymologically also means from Old Irish white. Can you believe that? Solstice, we all know it's the sun standing still. So this is stand means place. We're in the Zoom right now. We're on live TV. So reminding you that Marcia McLuhan said that the three things that advertising do is sex, death, and technology. I hijacked it and said everything that humans do is basically sex, death, and technology. Sex is feeling, emotion, intuition. Death is time, and technology is anything we invent that puts something between two people. Like we're putting spoken word between us today. So we'll just start off with a really simple question, just your hunch. We'll start with you, Walter. What is Finnegan's Wake?
Finnegan's Wake is my obsession now.
Oh my God, that's the same word Peter was telling me about. Uh-oh, we're in trouble now. Okay, that was good. Roy, what is Finnegan's Wake?
Everything and nothing. Yes.
Beautiful. Peter.
There's a line in there, phrase, a piece of farce.
Whoa, how'd they spell peace?
Peace, P-E-A-C-E, and farce, F-A-R-C-E.
So you said they, you didn't say Joyce. You said they.
Here comes everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, here comes everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, Duncan, what is Finnegan's Wake?
An ending and a beginning.
Nice. Okay, Rob.
I can't offer any better answers than those. It's definitely, it's like if maybe you stumbled upon some book of ancient knowledge and it was all in code and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I mean, I can make some of this out, but not much of it.
Beautiful. And I always said, similar to what someone said, is Finnegan's Wake is the history of everything that ever happened or will happen. And language about language. So I was listening to Marcia McLuhan on YouTube today on archetypes, history, and media. And he said that what he learned from Vico, which Vico had a big influence on Joyce, as we know, said that in ancient times when new technologies came, the people thought the new technologies came from gods, or they called the new technology God. So like the emperor's new clothing, like a cell phone is like Godhead for us, because we can look up, you know, you're driving down the road, you want to know where you can pee free, you can just have an app that's where to pee free.
Pee here now.
Pee here now. So what the humans did was that the new technologies were so potent that they would build the shield of art. So art would shield them, maybe from the hidden psychic effects of the new technology. What does Finnegan's Wake shield you from? We'll start with you, Roy.
I would say it takes down the shield against information overload. You know, so. rather than shielding.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
Mhm.
you don't have to settle for my verbs and verbs. Go ahead, Peter.
It shields you from ever having a sure, rational, confirmed meaning or understanding of anything. Because every word in there, we get like 4 or 5 different meanings out of it. So it just kind of breaks down the purpose of language as a tool.
Mm.
Very good. The purpose of language as a tool. Let's go into that. Okay, Duncan, what does the wake shield you from?
It only shields you if you want to be shielded. Otherwise, to brutal and not so brutal truth.
Wow. Go ahead, Walt.
So I think it really opens me up to a lot of different ways of seeing and thinking and being inspired. And so I guess maybe if it was shielding me from anything, it would be shielding me from being too closed off to those things.
And Walt, why we got you on not mute? What the heck is your background so these people will know where the place is, the space?
It's just a picture of the Phoenix Park Hotel in Dublin, right next to Phoenix Park. And it's circa 1906, I think.
What made you pick that background? That
well, anybody who knows about Finnegan's Wake would know that a big portion of it is kind of a lot of it occurs in and around Phoenix Park. It's a big part of the story. So just thought it would be kind of an interesting background for tonight.
Mhm.
Okay, Rob, what does the wake shield you from? I know you've just recently explored it.
That's why I want to give props to Walter for laying that out for me. It makes a lot of sense. I'm like, oh, okay. Definitely, I'd say maybe I feel there's a lot of infancy for me in this. And I guess knowing too much, thinking that I have all the answers, it shields me from realizing I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, that's why you named your podcast I'm Probably Wrong About Everything.
That's right.
Thank God. Thank God we got a bunch of brainiacs here. Okay, we just left Peter's high school hockey room, and now we're on the ocean. How beautiful is that?
This is the view from Vico Road in Dublin.
Oh,
there you go. Woo!
wow.
We
Cool.
like space better, Peter, than water. But funny because Rob has been gracious about sharing his time with his podcast for almost a year now, and I've been trying to brainwash him with the Wake and McLuhan, and I finally hit pay dirt, and I said, well, you should read the Wake to your daughter, and then read it to your high school students that you work with, or have them read it out loud, and write a book about the history of humans reading out loud to their kids. Duncan, we'll start with you. Tell us your feelings on when did humans start reading out loud to their kids, or any thoughts on that as the sort of hidden ground to what the Finnegan's Wake experience is?
Well, they started reading to their kids after script was invented. And we can assume that the only reason that they would do it is because they lost their fireside chat in the evening, which was the main form of communication, telling stories around the fireside. So there has to be books first in order to read the books, as opposed to the singers of the tales that would sing around the campfire of small groups.
Great. Go ahead, Roy.
I was gonna say I got to use books when I read to you. I know.
But it is, I'm curious, Roy. History of reading when it goes way back when people are speaking poetry out loud, then they get printed word and they start reading poetry. But then when did it become this phenomenon where you read a book out loud with your kid and they look at the printed word? So you're actually trying to get your kid to know what printed word is, but also you're trying to get them to fall asleep. You know? So I mean, this is like every theme that the Wake explores is sort of started when our parents start reading out loud to us, and the parents don't even realize that.
Yeah, but I bet Joyce would have liked Good Night Moon. That's about going to sleep. But a portrait starts with Simon Dedalus reading to the young Stephen about the moo cow coming up along the road. So it's almost like that's one of his very first scenes, is being read to.
Right. So Joyce knows that, but at some point he's telling us all as Finnegan's Wake readers that you have to read it out loud with a group of people. So, you know, I'm curious, Walt, when did you start reading books out loud to your kids and why?
So we've always read books out loud to our kids, even when they were very, very young. But I actually think that the idea of reading to your children is a pretty modern phenomenon. I mean, I think until fairly recently, kids were seen as assets. Maybe it was less something about how do we raise our children to flourish, or in fact, education wasn't even really that well valued until fairly recently. So I think, but I think the idea of reading out loud to your kids has certainly taken on and I think a well-deserved value in modern society, because I know it was such a great bonding between my wife and and our kids, and as well as I think really led to them growing up with a great appreciation for reading, writing, words in general, the intellectual life. But we started very young. I mean, even as infants. So.
Yeah. So Peter, did your parents read to you out loud growing up? And then how in the heck did you, what do you think of this sort of paradoxical thing that what the modern hip couple does is read out loud to their kids, and it's essentially what the Wake is?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely relevant to the Wake, and it's also it's funny that we're talking about it now, because it's a very it's a Christmas thing to read Christmas stories to your kids at night and things like that. That's the main thing I remember with my mom reading like Christmas stories to us when we were kids. And Christmas is like all over the Wake. They're sending Christmas cards to each other and things like that. As far as McLuhan, also, I'm thinking of he talks at some point, maybe in Gutenberg Galaxy, about how reading books out loud was the normal way to read for centuries. And now when we read silently, supposedly when you're reading silently, you're actually still like using your vocal cords very subtly as you're going through the page. And if I'm not mistaken, McLuhan's mother was an elocution teacher. So he was very, he talked about that a lot, about reading out loud. And I think also in Gutenberg Galaxy, he talks about how like doctors used to recommend reading out loud as an exercise, because it's breath control. It's like kind of using your whole body when you're going through pages and pages, pronouncing them all out loud.
Beautiful. Rob, go ahead, because two questions. One is, Rob, did your mom read to you out loud growing up? Is that how you got obsessed with reading? And then tell us a little about your experiment this week, having kids at your school read out loud the Wake.
Well, first, I just like to point out that for up until 100 years, let's say, most people, generally speaking, could not read. Like literacy was very low up until 100 years ago, like what Walter was saying, with education and us wanting to to really get that for the majority of people. Like, to be literate was a sign of wealth. Nowadays, everybody's literate. I think even McLuhan talks about people becoming literate, but they're the working class, and them coming back and being like, why the hell am I doing this? Why am I not doing what they're doing? Like, this is dumb. I'm just as literate as they are. Anyways, he mentioned that in passing, and I don't understand McLuhan either. I mean, it goes over my head. But your first question was honestly, my mother was a school teacher, became a principal, amazing. But I don't really remember her reading stories to me. I remember them telling me stories, lots of stories being told, and bits and pieces of reading. But more so than anything, it was the spoken word of like an oral story. That was the sort of hearth in my family, if you will. And then how did it go with kids this week? Well, I'm actually an elementary school teacher, and it's the week before winter break. We're now in winter break now. The day I did that was Friday, the day before the break. So as you can probably imagine, they were having the time of their lives. It wouldn't matter what they're doing. They could have been sewing, but they had a lot of fun with it. They're being silly. And what was really cool is that these students are like the ragtag group of the school. Like, I go around, I'm like, hey, can I borrow him? Can I borrow him? They're like, yes, please take this kid, take them, right? Because they have a hard time socially and emotionally regulating themselves in the classroom. So I bring them in and I say, and quite a few of them struggle academically as well. So with literacy. And one of the students, I said to him, I was like, this is the hardest book ever written, which apparently is a faux pas, Jerry's telling me, but I had an intentionality here. I was like, this is the hardest book ever written. Don't try to understand it. Just say the words. And then I demonstrated, I did it. And I was like, I picked a part that had like a 18 syllable word in it or something. And then they're like, oh, okay, so you can fail at this. I was demonstrating that the purpose of this exercise is to not succeed almost. That's where the fun is. And then the kids were going around and they're all silly. And that there was one kid drew a connection between the word being used in Netflix, which I thought was pretty cool. And they were making these connections based on their world and seeing these words that don't make any sense, but are compounds of words that they do understand. So they're inferencing. And then they're just saying it. And then it went around to this one kid who hates, like really tries to, he avoids work. And I'm like, all right. And then he was given it because he knew, he's like, I'm not supposed to get it. So I'm going to go for it because nobody else could get it. And they were having the time of their lives. And there was zero management. You probably heard me being like, okay, like, quiet, try to record this. Anyways, it was a lot of fun.
Good.
To answer your question. Did that answer your question?
Yes. And how much would you have them read? 2 lines or as much as they wanted? What was the instruction? How much?
I think I said pass because the first student who did it, and I didn't even record them, he was so into it. And the other guys were getting a little antsy. So I was like, oh, okay, pass, we're going to do. I play this game called Popcorn. And Popcorn, then you say the person's name. But I didn't do that there, but that's normally what I do. And I'm going to employ that method, Popcorn. And then kids can call on each other. And then that's how they know they're following along.
Yeah, it's important to know that. Go ahead.
Question. So, sorry. I don't know anything about how the Geneva Convention on Finnegan's Wake works. But with those kids, am I supposed to start back up from wherever they left off as a group? Or can you just read anywhere in the wake at any time? And then you join in gradually.
Yeah, where is this written down? Where is the convention where the rules are written down?
That's my question. Is that a faux pas or how does it work?
You said Geneva.
Well, it was good. Walt demonstrated. I don't need no stinking language. He was doing his head this way. But go ahead, Walt. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that one of the challenges for me reading The Wake was unlearning all the rules and realizing that I didn't have to follow rules. And like I didn't have to understand things, and it was really challenging. It's, in fact, still goes against the grain. It's like you read something, you don't understand it, and there's this, I have to figure this out. But unlearning that aspect is a big part of enjoying the wake for me.
Mm-hmm. Also, maybe there's like a divination with the wake where you open it at random, like they used to do that with Virgil. I forget what it was called, but Joyce makes a pun on that. That the wake should be also, you should use the random as well as the linear.
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
So, sorry, what is that called if you open a book at random and you just pick a? Is that called divination?
No, well, there probably there are all these names for different kinds of divination. I'm not sure, but I know Virgil. It's called something with the name Virgil in it.
Yeah,
Virgil.
Sortis Virgilianae, or Virgilian sortilege.
Yeah.
And bibliomancy is the way to
bibliomancy. Okay, good.
Jerry, you have summoned gods here, brother.
Well, it's interesting because I really wanted Peter to jump in too, because he knows a balance. I mean, all of you guys know this who are knee deep in the swamp muck of the wake, is how do you not get caught up in all the thousands of words that are written explaining the wake and just let it wash over you? It's a hard, sort of battle to do both. And I think, Peter, you coming to our group in Venice, how many years ago, you learned that we were not as well versed in Roland McHugh, John Gordon, all the sort of icons of explaining the wake. But then in the long run, you really are, to me, my hero, because you've surveyed them all. Mm-hmm. So how do you let go of that? Because you seem to be able to.
I think there's two ways of reading it, horizontal and vertical. That's the words I've heard people use, where it's like horizontal could be you're just trying to read it all out loud and let it wash over you and just enjoy the sounds and try to read as many pages as you can and just have fun pronouncing the words and things like that. That in itself is fun, and going that way, some of it you're going to understand, some little pieces you'll recognize, some things will be familiar, maybe from earlier in the book or from Ulysses or something like that. Then the other way, which I'll call vertical, is like you take one piece of it and you just drill down as much as you can and just unpack, do archaeology and unpack as much as you can, as far as what's the historical references, what are the possible resonances and things like that. Both approaches have their benefits. I try to, when I'm reading the wake, I try to use both approaches. Like in our reading group, we read it out loud at the beginning and the end, and then for 2 hours we're just unpacking it as much as we can.
Go ahead, Roy.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to say, I think Joyce encouraged both of the methods. He does have a letter where he says, he says, you should find 7 meanings in every word or every phrase. And he does that on one of the phrases in the wake. But then another time he said, people asked him about the levels of meaning. He said, no, there are no levels of meaning. It's just supposed to be pleasing to the ear. So go figure.
That's a perfect lead into our next question. But Duncan, I know you've been able to articulate this. When did you start delving deep into the wake? And then how did you, being such a deep book person, not get trapped in knowing that it's not just like my line, there's no content in the wake, the same thing that Peter just tackled. Like, how do you navigate unlearning and learning?
Just like the way we live our lives. I mean, we live our lives trying to figure things out. But as you get older, you begin to realize that you're not going to figure it out, and you might as well just live life and enjoy it. And I think the Finnegan's Wake is that way also. I mean, I have a huge library, and I mean, I just got exhausted, and I began to realize, I'd pick up a book and I'd read this book and say, God, that makes so much sense. And then, of course, I'd pick up another book and, oh my God, this makes so much sense too. So it reminded me of when I was a philosophy student way back when in the dark ages. And, the philosophy professor would, present some new philosopher. It was like, oh my God, this gal's really got it. And then, of course, 3 weeks later, we'd be on to somebody else. And, oh God, so you just finally go, all these people are interesting. I might as well enjoy it.
That's good. Now, I think I touched everybody, but Walt, did you tackle that? Because you've had an interesting thing in really getting into the Sweeney's Wake group does not emphasize the deep scholastic breakdown. They emphasize the reading. In me having a Finnegan's Wake group for over 25 years, emphasizing the breakdown, I was totally liberated when I got in the Sweeney's, and I love Sweeney's more than all the breakdown groups now, but I don't want to abandon those. So it's interesting because I find you really getting into the flow of it just as a reading experience. Like a dream is to be dreamt. It's not to be analyzed necessarily, but you can analyze a dream. And I find you sometimes going, well, I consulted, this book or that book. How do you navigate that? Because it's almost like you came in the other way. You came in not trying to figure it out, and now you're trying to figure it out. Or, tell us your route in that.
So I don't know. It feels like something that there's so many levels to understand it at and so many levels to experience it at. And I kind of dip down in, to certain levels and then come up to other levels. And those levels for me, initially, I had kind of decided I would never read The Wake. And I listened to an audiobook of it, probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or something. And just kind of fell in love with the sounds and said, that's all I want. And so I started reading it just like, but I was taking, like, before I joined the Sweeney's group, I was taking about 3 days a page, reading an hour to an hour and a half a day, just trying to get the words so they sounded as good as they did on that recording. And that was my entire enjoyment of it. And I'd only gotten through 70 pages or so when I came across Sweeney's, and they were doing 15 pages a week. And I'm like, whoa, I'll never keep up with that. But it's been great because, I in order to understand kind of how it should sound, you almost need to understand a little bit about kind of what it's actually saying, or maybe sometimes what it's meaning. I guess I don't particularly like the whole figuring out all the puns and figuring out all the cultural references and historical references and all that kind of stuff. So I more, I guess, stay at the upper level, or the level of just enjoying the words said in a way that, sound like an actual book you would read. And so that's been what's kept me motivated and kept me kind of obsessed about it for the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's good because Rob is slowly learning this, that he can learn about it, or he can just have kids read it out loud and see what that happens. I just wanted to give kudos to Sherry, great lady who attends the Austin Finnegan's Wake reading group, because when I started attending, I kept overemphasizing, there's no content in this book. So about 3 meetings into it, she says, Jerry, aren't you going to tell us there's no content? So there's a gentleman I know who's famous experimental filmmaker, Phil Solomon, fact, he passed away about a year ago. A big obituary in the New York Times, and he used to be a projectionist in a movie theater. And while he was working, he'd read Finnegan's Wake, and he said it would get me so pissed off I would throw the book against the wall. I think that proves that that book had some impact on a human being, that it would cause him to do that. And the flip is, oh, go ahead, Roy.
No, it reminds me of a review of a famous review by Dorothy Parker. This book is not to be put down lightly. It's to be thrown with force against the wall, you know.
That's right. Could even give you a BD. But another friend of mine who knew someone who used to walk around New York City reading Finnegan's Wake, and after they read one page, they would tear that page out of the book and throw it into the street.
Wow.
So, you know, literally the idea was someone would come along and pick up this page, you know, this piece of paper, and start reading it. And there's no indication on any page of the Wake that it's from Finnegan's Wake. They don't put the title of the book on top of the page. So that, I think, was a true piece of performance art, because someone could pick it up and just go, what is this?
Yeah.
Why does this exist?
The answer is blowing in the wind. Yeah.
It would have been a lot harder too, because before the internet, right? You just see this page and like, what the hell is this cryptic?
Right.
Now you could just take an excerpt and Google it.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Well, that's true of any page in any book in any language you don't know.
Yeah.
And that was the experience of most people before mass reading was introduced. And as someone said, about 100 years ago. Before that, you know, very few people knew how to read. And so books were entirely mysteries, just as much a mystery to them as the Rosetta Stone. You know, and there was a small dedicated class of people who wrote and read books in Latin or in Greek. So
beautiful. And I like Roy bringing up Bob Dylan, Blowing in the Wind, because they asked Dylan once, could you tell us about the 60s? And he literally said, read McLuhan. We know McLuhan got everything he knows from Finnegan's Wake specifically, but also Bob Dylan wrote about 5 years ago in one of his songs, I'm reading James Joyce. One of his songs. And Michael Gilmore of the Rolling Stone magazine, if it's in Rolling Stone, it's got to be true, said, why did you write that lyric? And he goes, because it rhymed with the next line. He didn't want to claim that he was actually. Go ahead, Roy. You're going to add something else?
Yeah, well, I was just getting back to what, you know, talking about reading it out loud versus stopping and kind of, you know, dissecting something. But there's also saying that, you know, literature is like is a spinning top, so it's kind of in while it's in motion. But there's a great little parable by Kafka called The Top, where he talks about this philosopher. He says, if I can understand one thing, I can understand everything. And he thinks the spinning top is, but then once he picks it up and it stops spinning, he gets nauseated. It's just a stick of wood, and he throws it away. You know, it's like.
So much for metaphors. That's Robert Browning wrote, our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is heaven for?
What's a metaphor?
And McLuhan reworded it, because all these quotes I drop aren't to be just left there alone.
Oh, that was.
It's to be reworded or like reinvented. And McLuhan said, our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is a metaphor?
Yes.
So, Rob, why don't you help us on this one? This is McLuhan in 1957. It is misleading to suppose any basic difference between education and entertainment. This distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So before I go to the round robin question, Roy, what's the difference between didactic poetry and lyric poetry?
I mean, didactic poetry has an ulterior motive. I would say well, I guess it's a matter of taste. In modern literature, that I think the didactic is looked down upon. You feel like the writer has an agenda rather than trying to please or give you an experience or share an experience. I mean,
but then what's lyric poetry?
Well, lyric poetry would be much more immediate revelation of the poet. I think, rather than doing it for a specific purpose.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Duncan.
She loves me, yeah. She loves me, yeah, as opposed to, any other number of things.
Right.
There's dopamine in my head, and that's why I've fallen in love with it.
Smile on your brother. Everybody get together, love one another right now.
Yeah. But anybody else want to jump in on what's the difference between didactic and lyrical poetry?
I'll jump in. So I'm just thinking about Ulysses. How we're talking about these different ways of reading a text and things like that. And with Ulysses, I remember when I first read it, like you can't help but look up a lot of the stuff because most of it's in sort of plain English, and you can understand what it's saying, but you don't understand what it's talking about or why it's relevant and things like that. So you end up doing all this research, and it's like you're reading the encyclopedia. It's like you're taking a class just from reading this book. So to me, that's didactic. You're learning all this new information. With Finnegan's Wake, you could certainly scour the encyclopedia and stuff, but it's just fun. It's just silly. It's just playful. And lyric poetry, to me, it's about like feeling, and that's to me, the Wake is just always fun and silly and things like that.
But now we'll stay right with you, Peter. The question is McLuhan's claiming, now he doesn't do theories, he's just more asking questions, but he's sort of asking if one teaches and the other one pleases, then he's implying that there's a difference between education and entertainment. So I know it's both, and it depends, but how the question is more. Is the Wake more entertainment or more educational? Now, you got to remember, I've been asking these more questions for quite a while, and this woman last week said, the word more does not function in your question. But, you don't have to answer the question, but just jump off on it. I mean,
I definitely think it's more entertainment because even like I was just actually reading an essay about the Wake and about the Edgar Queen A sentence that comes up a lot in there. It's this paragraph that Joyce quotes word for word from this philosopher, and he puts it all throughout the book in different forms. And it's like you can learn exactly what the passage means and what it's referring to and the history and all that, but it just the way he presents it and the way he mutates it, it's just funny. It's just entertaining. It's silly, It's so much more about play than it is about learning.
Yeah. Go ahead, Duncan.
It takes a whole lot of didactic activity to get to that point, though.
Go ahead, Walt.
So I actually really appreciated what Peter said earlier, contrasting Ulysses and the Wake, because I read Ulysses once, and I've read a bunch of it since then, little pieces here and there, but I didn't enjoy it. It was like not fun for me. And it was just like, it was almost like I slogged through it. I got through it. I'm like, okay, got my Ulysses card. And The Wake, I thought I would never read because I was like, this is going to be like Ulysses on steroids. But now that I've read it, it's like, it's just so much fun. It's so like, it's just, you know, and I think if you don't get to that point, I'm not sure how you would ever read it. But, you know, it's just a really, I think it's an enjoyable book to read.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Go ahead, Duncan.
Actually, it was about a year and a half of messing around with The Wake to where I went and discovered that every other book is so easy to read, including Ulysses. And it was literally like The Wake was exercising my mental and emotional and metaphorical muscles to such an extent that when I went back to Ulysses, which I had attempted before and never made it past about 150 pages, that suddenly Ulysses became understandable and enjoyable, and actually, in some senses, just very entertaining, very fun.
Go ahead, Rob, and then Roy.
Well, and maybe that's the separation, is that the didactic and the lyrical being, you know, feeling like there's a feeling to this. We all seem to be describing the act of like reading this book, not focusing so much on the information, but just the feeling of it. And that's why it's a social thing as well. You know, it's meant to be enjoyed in a group. But yeah, it's there's the facts or the information, and then there's the feelings. And there's an intersection there, but it sounds like for The Wake, it's more going to the feeling side of things.
Yeah. It looks like Roy's spinner is spinning. Go ahead, Walt.
Well, I was just going to say, so Jerry, were you trying to get to the point that maybe lyrical and didactic, you know, pleasure versus having an objective is not necessarily different things, but maybe this, you know, they're the same thing? It seemed like you were going there earlier, because it seems like certainly in terms of with education, at least, you know, the most effective form of education is enjoyable. And so, you know, I guess I'm wrestling with it in my mind. Is there really a dichotomy here, or is it, you know, can everything be lyrical or enjoyable, and everything? Although then the question is, does everything have some kind of a didactic component to it as well?
It's a great question. I wouldn't want to ruin it with an answer, but I will, because I was going down an alley once, and in Venice we have all these entertainment executives, and I heard this mother yell at her son through the window, "What's more important, TV or your homework?" And I wanted the kid to yell, "TV, because you wouldn't be able to pay for all my crap unless you had a job with TV." You know, but it's just this fantasy line I had in my mind. But it is a phenomenon. Like, we don't send our kids to the movies to watch or to, you know, to have their education. We specifically built this system. Like, you go to school, then you go home and play, or, you know, there's a division. And McLuhan said the city is classroom, and, you know, he spawned a lot of the education I came out of in the 60s, like Summer Hill, where you know, you go hang out with the gardener or the you know, the farmer in your town to learn farming, and you don't go to school and study it. So I mean, he's just bringing this thing. It's misleading to suppose any basic difference between education and entertainment, because they can both move the project forward. But if education isn't pleasing to you, like, just do a survey. Did everybody in here love every minute of their what did they spend 17 years or so many years in a school system. We generally don't say I love school.
It's great to have an entertaining teacher. Yeah.
Right. Go
Sure,
ahead,
but
Bill. Okay,
even
go ahead, Bill.
even if you have an entertaining teacher, though, it's still at a certain point education, and it's still, and education isn't bad, and it can actually be fun, but a lot of it, I think fundamentally it comes down to one of the two has a somewhat clear objective, which is whether it's training you for something or teaching you something, a skill or something you can use, and the other is just what we would naturally do as human beings, which may or may not achieve any other objective for you. And I think to the point that could education be more more lyrical, more fun, more in touch with who we are as human beings? Absolutely. And the whole industrial way we've organized education these days, I think could probably be done much better. But the fact is, still, I think when you get right down to it, is they're serving two different purposes.
Yeah, you got Google having yoga and sushi at their campuses. They call them campuses. They should have a Finnegan's Wake room. But hold on.
I'm working on it.
There you go. He's working. But it is funny. Peter, how did you get into the Wake because you liked rap music? Because see, you're younger. Rob's getting into the Wake because we're brainwashing him to believe he can become a podcast.
You're the pusher. You're the pusher of Finnegan's Wake.
But it is. I mean, what you grew up a reader, but there's something that sort of seeped you into the Wake in particular. And was your love of rap helping that?
I mean, the two are definitely connected as far as just loving wordplay and lyricism and things like that. But my introduction to the Wake was really just I was already interested in Joyce, and I got interested in Joyce through Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell's way of making Joyce seem so interesting was that here's this modern writer writing about modern regular people, Leopold Bloom and all that. It's all like a guy living in a city, living his regular life, but it's all imbued with this mythic depths and things like that. So it just made it seem like realism, but really weighted with so much density and just so much. I don't know. There's just a power to it. It's inexhaustible. It's like I've been reading Joyce for 15 years. There's people I'm sure have been reading. You got your group for 25 years. These are just two books we're talking about: Ulysses, Finnegan's Wake. It's the same books we're reading and studying over and over and over again, and always getting joy and pleasure out of it. So yeah, that's always
look at the Bible. People study that.
The Bible's a good example. Hold on, Duncan, one second. And I know, Peter, your love of hockey, because the hockey puck is dense, and it's the density of the hockey puck. You don't want to get whapped in the head with one of them. Okay, Duncan, sorry, go ahead.
Well, in all of us here, we've had someone or some ones in our life that taught us that if we put a little bit of effort into certain things, we will actually get more pleasure later on. And I don't know how they did it, but generally speaking, if there's any great failure in American education right now, is that it does seem that there is a rigid distinction between learning and enjoying. And schools, in an attempt to keep students in school, seem to be leaning. Some schools lean really heavily into the, let's give them stuff they enjoy, and don't ever get to the let's challenge them a little bit point. And then there's other schools that are just saying, well, if they're going to go to Harvard or Penn State, you know, they got to buckle down. I mean, it's really competitive. And, you know, so there's been this disconnect. And I think McLuhan, you know, first of all, the McLuhan quote, as many McLuhan quotes, is McLuhan really goofing. Because McLuhan was a highly educated person and he valued education tremendously. And he, if anybody, knew that when you really have a good background and you have literate skills, life can be tremendously enjoyable. But in order to attract people, he would, you know, he's a good bullshit.
He's definitely
We can tell a good
charlatan. Go ahead, Rob. Yeah, he is a charlatan. Go ahead, Rob.
What?
Yeah.
Was Duncan going to say something, or
you done?
No.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
done.
What Walter was saying about the best teacher is one you don't even know you're getting an education, right? You're having so much fun. You're doing group projects. You're like, I was having this conversation with a student about this show called Coco Melon. My daughter's 2 years old. She loves it, right? But what she doesn't understand is that the content of the show is part of the didacticism, the education. Guys is the lyricism of it, you know, London Bridge is falling down. And it's like, it hurts my brain to watch it because I kind of see what's happening here. And it's like, but it's what's happened to me, right? I try to teach, you know, I was conditioned into having manners. Like, why do I put the fork on this side? You know, it's just the way I've been told. And then I see how my daughter eats and she's a savage, right? You know, she, like, if anybody says that people are vegans, that's absolute bullshit. Not carnivores. Anyways, but what I was saying is that, yeah, with education, there is a sense of indoctrination, right? Why are we being educated on the things that we're getting? You know, why are we going to school at this time, Monday to Friday? Why do we get breaks? Things like that. I mean, it's the hidden psychic effects too. And maybe I've answered my own question, because the question I want to ask you is, how was Marshall McLuhan so influenced by Finnegan's Wake when I don't understand any of it? Like, people are like, oh yeah, there's Christmas cards in there. I'm like, well, missed that.
Yeah. Rob, we'll get to that question. Hold on.
Okay.
Go ahead, Roy.
Well, you know that the idea of McLuhan being a charlatan. I know that that was a review. Somebody called Joyce a literary charlatan, and I forget who it was, but then, you know, the idea that Shem was a sham. He kind of plays up that idea that, you know, and he foisted a forged check on the public, you know, but also, you know, the Shem and shaman, the shaman as the sham man, and there's a tradition that the shaman is half fake. You know, that they kind of play, they play between actually having powers and actually simulating powers that they don't have. And you know, so.
That's why my heroes in life are snake oil salesmen. or you know, fake the guys who do
Bridge sellers,
wrestling. You know, you already.
So you like Trump? Is that?
You already know it's fake, but can you be entertained by it? You know, snake oil salesman. It's a deep thing, but I want to jump back what Walter was saying, because it really brings up this: how do you get young people involved in the wake now? Is you simply say, like Terence McKenna. Peter Q got into him through Joseph Campbell. And then younger people, I have a slew of like 10, 18-year-old kids who have sort of come in and out of the wake. And most of them were because my flyers said Patti Smith, Philip K. Dick, and Terence McKenna. And it was Terence McKenna because of LSD, because kids want to alter their state of mind. So they read a little about LSD, and then they read Terence McKenna, Love Finnegan's Wake, and they go, wow, this has legitimacy because one of my counterculture kind of heroes has mentioned this book. So that's a funny way. The other little thing I want to comment on in regards to Ulysses was I had a bias because I jumped into the Wake as my introduction to Joyce. I know I had it on my reading list, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man in college, but I forgot everything I studied in college, I think, unless it's sitting in my brain somehow. But I had this bias. So 25 years I'm reading Finnegan's Wake. Then I get into Peter's group, which starts reading the Wake every week instead of every month. And I'm like really knee deep in these highly literate people telling me the history of Ireland, Sherry going into William Blake, Duncan going into Gregory Bateson, and then Stevie going into Shakespeare. So I'm learning the big picture view of all literature. So then Peter, hijacks himself off to Ireland and says, well, we're only going to do Austen Wake every other week now. And so Duncan and I go, well, we might as well start a Ulysses reading group. So we start a Ulysses reading group every other Thursday instead of Peter's Austen Wake group. And I have a bias. I think the Wake is way better than Ulysses, but I'm going through it and I want to. And when you have a guy like Stevie, who's a total Ulysses freak and knowing so much about Shakespeare, it really grounds you, sort of, when there's someone there who knows a little of the ground. So, I mean, to answer your question, Rob, really quick, is what McLuhan learned from the Wake was, where did Joyce get it? He said, I'm applied Joyce. So, I'm applied Aquinas. So I got my licks from Aquinas, when in reality it's Bruno and Vico and a million, Lewis Carroll, and Peter could list you all the guys that Joyce pointed to and said, I'm standing on their shoulders. And then McLuhan learned that same thing. Well, I'm going to be called Applied Joyce. So I'm going to stand on his shoulders, which is basically when you invent some technology, whether it's philosophy or a car, a cell phone or a bulldozer, you're extending some humanness. So how does that shape your behavior? So how did spoken word shape our behavior? It made us ear oriented. How did printed word shape our behavior? It made us eye oriented. So I'm going to flip that and make the reading experience an ear experience. That's what Joyce did in what attracted McLuhan. So that's a cheesy summarization, but it's basically. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I was just going to say that for me, McLuhan is a little bit easier to understand of his fragmentation of things. Like he deconstructs things and this is what's happening and kind of why it's happening. Or maybe I'm just drawing that connection because now I'm a parent and I'm watching my daughter coalesce things together, but she won't remember putting these pieces together to this broader perceptual story. Whereas me, I'm kind of seeing the pieces come in based on my own, where I'm at and seeing things. And so for me, McLuhan is, he's pulling it apart to see those hidden psychic effects.
And he's a poet. You got to remember, he's a trickster. He's in the education business. He's in the literature business. So what does he get his picture on Time magazine for as the electronic media guru? Like he's saying TV's better than literature. He wasn't saying that. He was just saying we should pay attention to TV because it's shaping us. And yeah, I'm still a literature guy. He's still a literature guy. So that's where he got into trouble, because he seemed he wasn't holding true to what he was teaching. And that's why when he first started teaching in St. Louis, he couldn't reach these kids about T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound. So he taught them Superman comics and advertising. And that's how he got to him. He says, well, how can I get them to pay attention? Well, that's why you have to talk to kids on terms of TikTok. You just tell them that TikTok and Finnegan's Wake are this one and the same thing, and show them how it overlaps. But back to what Duncan said, there's one thing that McLuhan quoted, and it was someone else who said this, but it was that there's a sardonic sense of humor that the moralist substitutes anger for perception. Now, he's not making a statement that this is true, but I thought it could bring up some sort of idea to go round robin, like what is the function of laughter, and why is the Wake such a great illustration of Menippean satire? Because is Joyce doing sardonic sense of humor as a substitute? He's substituting anger for perception. Because is he so pissed off at Dublin or being raised a Catholic that it's sort of leading him in to perceiving and having epiphanies? So is he flipping his anger into perception? Peter, I'd love for you to jump off on that, and then Duncan, go ahead.
The way I interpret what you're saying about laughter versus anger and substituting one for the other, it's like when somebody encounters a difficult text, you could just say, I don't know what the hell is going on here. I don't know what these words mean. It's making me angry. Like we said, I'm going to throw the book at the wall or something like that. Or you could sit with it for a while and not try to understand every single word, and not try to, everything has to be a reference to something. And then maybe it could, I think the point of it is to open up some different form of understanding and some different form of meaning, and joy, rather than, like we were talking about earlier, didactic, like learning about something or reading some story, some description of something, more about just having fun with language. Yeah, that's what it makes me think of.
That's good. And Duncan, I'm curious, because when I first met you, probably been almost 2 years now, you were saying, I like comedy. And I'm thinking, this guy's a brainiac book guy, and he's saying he loves comedy. Talk about this idea of substituting anger for perception in Joyce's humor.
Well, I think like in certainly in the Dubliners and in Portrait of Artists, there was a lot more anger. By the time he got to Ulysses, he was becoming more mature, and the anger is just as biting, but it's more mellow and it's spread around a little bit more. And by the time he got to Finnegan's Wake, he was becoming, as you've heard me say, he's into the carnivalesque. He's into the fact that, hey, we're all humans here. We are part of everybody. And we kind of, we do some cute stuff and we do some goofy stuff. And it's not, there's some kind of sound that's leaking in that's pretty loud. I don't know what it is.
It's squeaking here.
Yeah. Anyway, Joyce has a very mature and wise sense of humor by the time he gets to Finnegan's Wake, in my opinion. And it's not anger so much anymore. The anger has drifted away, and he's actually become, in some ways, very wise by that time. And funny.
That was good, Duncan. Go ahead, Roy. Any comment?
Yeah, well, one of my favorite lines in Ulysses, he in the library it says, Stephen, he laughed to free his mind from his mind's bondage. Like there's something liberating about laughter. Whereas his mind is so obsessive that it's it'll like strangle you if there isn't some kind of release. But I mean, I know he was disappointed that people didn't get his humor. I think right away people didn't think of it, Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake as particularly funny. Whereas Joyce said, I'm really a comedian, and he at one point he said that he thought comedy was a higher art form than tragedy because comedy was based on possession of the desired object, whereas tragedy is the loss of the desired object. So,
Oh, that's heavy. That's really good, bro. Any comment, Walter, on this topic?
Well, I had heard many years ago that I guess laughter, all laughter, all humor is essentially a cry of victory, of defeating your enemy in some way. And in many ways, that's rang true over the years. So, this, just kind of an observation, like, maybe as to how to interpret it, but.
Dude, that's heavy. I want to find out who said that.
It was about 40 years ago. I can't remember where I read it.
That's heavy because Gurdjieff says laughter is a reconciliation of yes and no. And I like that one. But Steve Allen said behind every joke there's a grievance. Now I don't like the word every there. I think behind jokes there are grievances. But it is interesting how, like, we go to you, Rob. Why in the heck are you you're a bookie kind of guy. You're doing podcasts. Why are you pursuing comedy?
Rob. I love being in those rooms. Like there's an intelligence in there and a camaraderie. And I enjoy and it's something social and it gets my faculties going. Peter might appreciate this and he might know the artist, but I think it's Ice Cube and he had an album called Laugh Now, Cry Later. Is that right? Is that Ice Cube? But in your name, you use Laughtears. And it's like, those are your options. You can either laugh or you can cry.
I love that word because I think Joyce summarizes his book in one word many times in the whole book, so people don't have to read 628 pages. They can just write one word.
It's more economical.
Yeah, it's more economical. Like Laughtears is the ultimate because he took the letter A and the letter S and added them to the word laughter. So if you take those two words aside, those two letters aside, that's as. That is metaphor. All language is metaphorical. As, like. That's, setting up the metaphor. You put it into the word laughter, and you got Laughtears, so you laugh and you cry. That's the human condition. You fall and you get up again. But I think there's another thing we could explore here. And I'm open for anybody else bringing up any sort of thing we can go round robin with. But let me try this. Go ahead, Duncan.
Before we move on from this thing having to do with laughter, etc., I do want to emphasize that I am smitten by Bakhtin's idea of the carnivalesque and by his critique that particularly starting in the Romantic movement, that laughter started becoming much more satire and much more full of anger and self-righteousness. And certainly, as I see much of comedy in today's world, it tends to be feeling like it's coming from a superior place and an angry place and a self-righteous place, as opposed to a carnivalesque, which recognizes that, hey, we're all a bit goofy. Life is pretty absurd, and we should learn to laugh, to notice the goofiness in ourselves and others, and the absurdity in ourselves and others, and that we will be more humane and we'll have a better time. So I just like to keep that distinction when we talk about humor and comedy.
Walter and then Peter, go ahead.
So I like what you say, Duncan, and I appreciate, going for the humanity of it. But fundamentally, I think that when you look at humor, there's, even when you're talking about yourself, there's always kind of the butt of the joke or something that's being joked about. And so consequently, I think fundamentally, humor at its heart is an aggressive action. And we can do it kindly at some, maybe that's not even the right word. But I think fundamentally, when you get right down to it, it is, tearing something down or making fun of it or, whatever. And so I think that, I think it's great to have a good sense of humor about yourself, because I just think it's a healthy way to be. I do think that if you're making humor about something besides yourself, then that's, I think fundamentally an aggression.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I do too. But I think Peter wanted to weigh in, but just before, I asked a question in my interview series: can satire be destructive? Now, most people say yes, because if you're a cartoonist in another country and you make fun of another country, they might kill you. And we would then say, well, dying is destructive. Maybe you don't mind being killed because you made the wrong cartoon. You were on your way out. But,
Charlie Hebdo.
Yeah, but my friend who used to write comedy with Robin Williams on Mork and Mindy, I said, can satire be destructive? And he says, that's the job of satire. And it's funny because, what you just said is important, Walt. I worked for George Carlin for a while, and I was always amazed because his manager for 35 years, and he still manages his estate after he's dead, was a total Finnegan's Wake freak, and it was just amazed me. But George was so bitter at the end of his life. I mean, take this one, for example. Anybody who's anti-abortion, they're so ugly, you wouldn't want to fuck them anyway. I mean, that is like, whoa.
Be canceled.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. But it's Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. So, I mean, it's really touchy now to go from cancel culture to nuance culture and from here to eternity. Yeah. Do you want?
Back to the. I just wanted to add on about the Laughtears thing, because I was just thinking about how I think what Joyce is often doing in the Wake is he's combining opposites, and he's showing how like one thing pushed to an extreme can become its opposite, and he especially does that with laughing and crying, because like when you could laugh hard enough that you cry, and it's possible to be sad enough that you don't know what else to do but laugh, and also both. I think what Joyce kind of shows sometimes is that laughing, similar to crying, is like a release. It's a safety valve. It's a way to, I think Roy was saying this earlier, to like let off the pressure and intensity of the mind. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Roy.
I think that's a proverb of hell from Blake. Excessive laughter weeps. I think that but I wanted to talk about Bakhtin. I think it's Bakhtin talks about, one of the characteristics of a totalitarian regime is that then there are certain things that you are not allowed, you cannot laugh at. It's forbidden to laugh at. And I think, that was a famous line of Hitler, they're not laughing now,
Right.
But I found the whole David Chappelle thing and the trans community interesting, because they're saying, you can't really make jokes about this. That's not okay. And I think that's what he was. I don't think, I think some of his attitude was mistaken. I think he was kind of standing up for the freedom of comedy to savage it equally, and you can't say there's one group or one thing that you can't laugh at. What?
Abuse for all.
Abuse for all. Equal opportunity abuser. That's good.
Well, what's that movie, Life of Brian? You are all individuals. We are all individuals. And then the one guy's like, no, we're not. I love that scene.
The story behind that is amazing because I've repeated that for years. And someone told me if you watch the extras on the DVD, that was an extra in the crowd who yelled that. And it wasn't in the script. And the director said, okay, leave that line in. That's like, you all you nonconformists are alike.
My understanding is that Bakhtin never said anything about Joyce, only because he would have gotten in trouble with Stalin.
Oh.
But the rumor is that he considered Joyce to be right in there in the carnivalesque.
Well, Joyce is the carnivalesque incarnate, man. Yeah.
Well, without humor, without the ability to sort of push that boundary, if you will. I mean, that's how David slew Goliath, right? Is this kind of unassuming power that wins out. And I think that's, to me, that's what comedy is. It's sort of the David versus Goliath, right? Often comedians are sort of pathetic looking characters.
Mm-hmm.
There's something endearing there, I think. And to do comedy from somebody who's done it, it takes a lot of tenacity to be gender appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that also goes back to the. I know Northrop Frye talks about the difference between the allazone and the aeron. Goes back to the Greeks. I mean, the allazone was kind of the brute, savage, who got their way through brute force, and the aeron is the one who uses irony, which I guess Socrates used that, but to undercut. You don't have to really oppose your opponent, but you can use irony to undercut what they use their own force against them, I guess.
That's another thing McLuhan learned from the Wake was you can find epiphanies in everydayness. You can flip a breakdown into a breakthrough. You can, take a weakness and mold it into a strength. And if you're the lonely kid being beat up by the bullies on the, then you just learn how to make fun of them and everybody laughs. And then, you have a career on YouTube. Just watch some of these kids who do that. I mean, it's an amazing thing. That's why I constantly say that Joyce invented the internet and disguises it as a book. I mean, there's nothing more communistic than saying .com all the time. And
communist.
Tribal communism at its best.
That's a great joke.
Believe me, I didn't make it up. I ripped it up. But I want to ask another question about storytelling, because I don't joke when I say there's no content in the wake. It's the act of reading it pushed so to the extreme. It's like a triple fake out or a quadruple fake. And even Robert Anton Wilson says that reading the wake is like playing chess on 4 different chess boards piled up on top of each other, but not 4 different chess games. You're literally taking one pawn from this layer and moving it up to this layer. So it's a lot more complex. And is his experimental literature storytelling, or is it something completely different? And I'm going to read a quote from a experimental filmmaker, Hollis Frampton. He said, "Narrative is born among the animal's necessity of the spirit because we're waiting to die." So you've heard me ask the question, can you forget to die? But this is an interesting thing, because why did humans become storytellers? It's so romantic to say, oh, they stared into the campfire and they would tell stories, and cave paintings are storytelling, and the ritual, and even McLuhan saying the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. But here we're talking about literature. And, when you rate the books of the world, you usually get Shakespeare, the Bible, and Joyce as the top 3. So, I mean, I think it's pretty fortunate. We got one of the 3 being discussed today pretty deeply. Yeah, I mean, literally. And people don't realize, when I saw USA Today headline many years ago, when all the great writers rated the greatest books ever, the headline read, "Ulysses, greatest book ever? Huh?" That was literally the headline. So I'm curious.
Wait, what?
Yeah, like what? And so I'm curious, is storytelling more innate or more invented? We'll start with you, Roy.
Innate.
Thank you. And also just comment, is Joyce storytelling, narrative, or is he doing something?
Well, I think that desire to see yourself as part of a story. I mean, that's one of the first lines in the portrait. He was baby Tucko. His father tells him the nursery rhyme, and it's very important that he identifies with one of the characters. And I don't know if that's getting outside of your life or if it's giving shape to your life, but seeing it as a story, I think, is a way of gaining some kind of control over events. Yeah.
It's good. Duncan, storytelling, more innate or more invented?
Duncan, you're muted.
That was awesome.
In apes. It's in apes.
That was like Forrest Gump when he gives a speech at the civil rights thing and nobody hears him. That was awesome.
It's like this.
Read my lips.
Yeah. But did you say in apes, APES?
Yes.
Yeah, because Duncan might know this. If you listen to Marshall McLuhan's album, The Medium is a Massage, it's produced by John Simon. He did Joni Mitchell, he did Simon and Garfunkel, and a lot of great pop art, Janis Joplin. I just saw it at my record store for $38 the other day. I was like, I got to get this. Anyways, you can listen to it online. He goes, the line he got from Winston Churchill goes like this: we shape our buildings and they shape us. Then John Calkin and Marshall changed it to we shape our tools, then they shape us. But on the album, it says we shape our tools, then they ape us. That our tools start imitating us, our hidden psychic effects.
Mm-hmm.
That was good. Okay, Peter Q. Storytelling, more innate or more invented?
I would say more innate as well. what this makes me think of is, so first of all, the Wake, even though there's no real stories in there, I agree in a lot of ways there is no real content. It does take elements from storytelling. It constantly is saying once upon a time and things like that. But also, when I was in Dublin, I just kept thinking about, like, why did Joyce just write about this place for so long? You know, he spent 30, 40 years just writing about this one place. And I think it's the same reason why people tell stories. Like, we want to have people want to know the history of things and how things came to be how they are. Why is this city like this? Why are these streets like this? And in the Wake and Ulysses, he talks about, you know, the Viking history and all these different invasions and clashes and all that. And that's how things came to be how they are. And also, Vico has an idea that language contains history in it. Like, language is the way it is because of different wars and invasions and things like that. So, like, you know, the English language contains all these references to all these different languages and things that we've either borrowed or stolen and things like that.
Beautiful. Go ahead, Walt. Any comment? Lang, what is the question? Storytelling, more innate or more invented?
Oh, I definitely think that storytelling is innate. You know, it's gone on forever. It's the way we transmit our history, or had for, you know, until very least recently, the way we transmitted our history and values and culture. And but I also think it's always had a certain practical, pragmatic aspect of it, where we can use it to achieve certain goals. So, you know, it might be the story is being told by whoever's in power, and, you know, they're trying to control the story. Or it could be somebody like Joyce telling a story because he's trying to achieve something. So then it becomes, is it less innate, or is it, you know, or is it invented? And I think it's moved from being almost completely innate to often now telling stories is something that's invented. We've used it to achieve certain ways of affecting other people, either emotionally or, you know, bringing them to our will. So I think it's both.
Good. I like that, because
Yeah.
the right answer is the one I'm going to give at the end. But
No, I can't wait. Can't wait to hear the right answer.
You swayed a
There's
little.
a carnivalesque. That's a carnivalesque comment, by the way.
It's like Sunra said, or, you know, women say it's his story. No, it's her story. Or as Sunra says, they say it's his story. It ain't my story. So, Rob, storytelling, more innate or more invented?
Well, I mean, I certainly love Walter's answer. I believe it's innate. The vehicle is innate. Where it's being driven is very much invented. And I think it's no accident that when we talk about culture, I mean, the same thing to culture, it being like where stories are told and where we agree that these stories that are being told have meaning and we're going to continue on this way, is also the same culture used to describe bacteria all doing one like scurrying thing. That's what bacteria does, is scurries like this. That's the story that they tell themselves. We got to keep scurrying, right? Dogs, the stories that they tell themselves, right? It's all stories.
But the dogs smell themselves.
They smell the stories, right?
They smell the stories.
Smell you later.
Smell. That's good.
Yeah.
Smell. I know. I wrote a couple words on my notes here. One was spellbound. Like, what you know, once you invent language, then it goes to what Roy said. It really resonates with this guy who did a study on Mahler made symbolism. But he said the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. So it's like the very crises that threatens us trying to decide whether storytelling's innate or invented sustains language on its own. Like, yeah, if you invent language, you bet you're going to have stories. What you don't have a choice. It's like 4 words that really totally baffle me from McLuhan is the drama of cognition. If you invent thinking, you bet you're going to have drama. Now, I don't know if that's what he meant, but that's, again, user is content. So I got like one more thing. Go ahead, Roy.
Well, I mean, the thing about I'm still thinking about this idea that the Wake has no content, but the I know he does at one point. He does talk about the old storyolum. I think so. That's what he says. And in a way, I think that's what a myth is. It's a story. It's such an old story. It's no longer pertains to an individual, but it's like something that everybody repeats over and over again. And but he does tell, there are all these stories like at the bar, the Norwegian captain and the Russian general and the brothers Boyles, the battle between the brothers Cain and Abel. I mean, those stories, they're continually being repeated. But he said, I just want to tell it in a new way. I don't want to. But he definitely was a storyteller. Oh.
Right.
A stolen teller.
Stolen. Last word in stolen telling. Yes.
What's the first part of that word mean, Duncan? I'm missing it.
Stolen, to steal.
Oh, stolen teller. Yeah.
He's a stolen teller.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Walt.
This is more of a question. So how widespread is this idea that the Wake has no content? Because I enjoy it, but I actually also think it's kind of a masterpiece. But I couldn't say that second part if I thought it didn't have content. So it's like I certainly think it has content, but how widespread is it that people think it doesn't?
I can answer.
Don't tell Jerry, but I agree with you.
No, I just feel so good that Sherry asked me once, aren't you going to tell us there's no, it's something Robert Dobbs, Bob Dobbs used to say, to emphasize, just like McLuhan saying the medium is the massage. So most people get that wrong. The medium is the message or the medium is the massage. And Rob actually has a 22-minute podcast with me and Clinton explaining this, that McLuhan's a literature guy. He wasn't saying that form is more important than content. But it sounds like, and most people think the medium is the message, is saying that the form is more important than the content. Now, McLuhan was a content guy. He came out of literature. He's not going to say that, but he emphasized it so people would shift their reality tunnel to consider it. So if I say there's no content in the Wake, of course there's content in the Wake. It's a book, and if you put 628 pages of black ink on paper, you're going to have content. It doesn't matter if a monkey typed it up or anything. In fact,
that's not what I meant by content, though.
Okay, what did you mean by content?
Well, I meant content meaning something substantial there, something worthwhile, something meaningful.
But again, I think the sense that Jerry gets at, and I agree with you, Walter. Of course, there's nothing. No book has as much substance as the Wake. It has more substance than any book. But it's like, what is the Wake about? If somebody asks you, what's Finnegan's Wake about?
Well, okay, sure, but that's different than saying, does it have substantial content? What's it about means like, what's the narrative, or how can I give you the short synopsis of what's going on there? And I can't give you that.
I have proof now, Walter. You know what cliff notes are? There's no cliff notes. The book ever written, and they threw it up, and they go, well, we can't do cliff notes on that. Now, of course, that's bullshit, because John Gordon's book, Anthony Burgess's intro to the shorter version of Finnegan's Wake, John Bishop's intro and Book of the, these are all the cliff notes for Finnegan's Wake, better than we could imagine. There's so many books that explain the Wake well, but it's just me pushing a statement to the extreme, sort of like Beavis and Butthead, laughing.
Yeah, right. This is a.
Go ahead, Duncan.
Jerry did work with Frank Zappa and George Carlin.
That explains a lot.
And he liked Archer McLeod. They are all people that like to make extreme statements.
Yeah.
To get the conversation started.
Yeah.
It's a technique that he has. And so, and it is provocative and it does lead to discussion.
Yeah.
In
the nuanced culture, it can get you laid too, because
the perks of comedy. Yeah.
Go ahead, Roy.
But the I'm gonna forget what I said. I was thinking, the idea of process over result, though, I think in a way that can seem like it. There is no content, where you think of content as something that you can hold or you can present in a frame. But he even there's one line in the way he talks about the eye that analykesis versus the ear that analykesis versus the eye that sums. The eye that sums up, can sum everything up in one moment of that's got an outline, whereas the ear, everything bleeds into everything else, and so you really can't point to one content or say this is the content. Yeah.
And also, the Wake has so many riddles in it. There's always characters that are asking these riddles, like the prank queen. She asked this riddle, and there's no answer to it. You could try to unpack it as much as you want. There's no solid answer to it. So, and there's no solid answer to what the Wake is. It's just process. It's just experience.
I think, but I think there's also deep questions that are asked in the Wake and explored. And the interesting thing about the Wake is Joyce doesn't give you the answers. What he does is he inserts you as a reader into the story and presents you with something that what you brought into it, who you are, your values, your experiences, your life, your history, is all what's going to is going to determine how you tell that story. I don't know if this makes sense to anybody else, but it's
it makes sense.
But for me, it's like I'm reading it, and the more I get into it, the more I come across things, and I'm like, I'm feeling things and feeling a certain way about characters, or assuming motives, or assuming they, who they are, and I realize it's more about who I am and less about what he's written there. And I just think that's a masterpiece. That's that's content.
That is, Rob, you're next, but I just wanted to piggyback to Walter. So McLuhan's 40 years, 1940 to 1980, mid-career, 60s, he updated the medium as the message to the user as the content. That's exactly what you did. So he said, it's no longer the medium as the message. Now it's the user as the content. Most people don't know that. And when Sputnik went up, he updated the global village to the global theater, because Sputnik formed a prosimian arch around the world, the new sphere, as Chardin says, and then we all became actors on the global village. That's why every kid, all they do is they make videos to make who they are, and that's
isn't that what we're doing right now?
Precisely.
Exactly. We're trying to be young.
We can do it too.
That's what I'm saying. Rob's a literature guy, and he's doing, and same with Peter. Peter does his Finnegan's Wake on Facebook. It's live TV. It's amazing that what Joyce got us. Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Well, it's sort of what Walter was saying. It was like, whoa, does this book provoke these questions or does it evoke these questions? And then the other piece is, that BS line your high school teacher would say, like, life's a journey. It's all about the journey, not the destination. It's like, sure, whatever, but I'd like to get the fuck out of high school first. But with Finnegan's Wake, it's sort of like, it's a journey. Don't worry about the destination. You're not going anywhere. This is where you're going.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm picking up.
That's total.
I don't know that to be true.
Psychogeography. That's flaneurism. That's what all the guys and all the people in Paris, when Joyce was writing The Wake, were doing. Duchamp and them. They were just sitting at the coffee house, drinking coffee, being slackers. And Joyce was just listening to shortwave radio and writing it all down. And that is the epitome of what you just said. But we think we have to name a destination. We think we have to name our journey, to have.
That's the education. Education is that you got to have a destination.
But
we're deprogramming ourselves.
But that's the thing. I always say we could be reading People magazine instead of Finnegan's Wake. There's no difference because it's a reflection of the people who are attending. So, we used to have a guy who come to our Wake meeting, and he was an old Brit, and he did everything he brought up was in Roland McHugh, the guide to Finnegan's Wake. But he didn't have Roland McHugh. He was living Roland McHugh. So it was amazing how that was a reflection of who he was. He would say, oh, that's a battle. Oh, that's the name of a river. So it is a lot what you talked about, Walter, is the user is the content.
Did you check his house to make sure he didn't have a copy of that book, though?
I did not. Okay, we're going to sort of wind to a close here. I want to thank you all. I do want to do the tale of the tribe so everybody can think, this is the initial meeting of this festival. So you can think of it, and it's really applicable. The trivium is rhetoric, grammar, and logic. So who is your rhetoric hero? Who is your grammar hero? Who is your logic hero? Then the quadrivium is 4. So this is 3 plus 4 is 7. The quadrivium is music, astronomy, arithmetic, and geometry. So I just want to give you an example. When Bob set up this 10 holy offices, a template, he named geometry Finnegan's Wake. He didn't put a human being. None of his answers as an icon hero is not a human being except Finnegan's Wake. So he's almost like putting Finnegan's Wake over Joyce, which I always thought was interesting. So you don't have to name a person. You can name an object, a video game, a book, a movie, a podcast. For rhetoric, he put McLuhan. And then the other 3 I'll fill you in on. But at some point, familiarize yourself with the Holy Offices poem by Joyce because it was satire. So rhetoric is using language to influence others. That's what I found out from reading etymology today. What really got me was the etymological background for the word grammar. Magic incantation. So that's sort of like light. So today is the winter solstice. The sun is still. But after grammar, music incantation, it said mumbo jumbo. So grammar as mumbo jumbo, that's what most people, people are going to accuse Finnegan's Wake to be mumbo jumbo. Or I forgot to tell you, my friend taught me that blarney, which is this term Irish people use to sort of describe mumbo jumbo, blarney is convincing someone to go to hell and enjoying themselves.
Winston Churchill.
Say it again, Duncan.
That's Winston Churchill.
Very good. So I looked up mumbo jumbo, and etymologically it means big empty talk from 1896. So that is an amazing thing, thinking about the wake. It's big. Is it empty? No, it's full of a lot of talk. But some people in the normal world would say it's empty because it doesn't tell you something specific.
Because they don't understand it at all.
They don't understand it. Yeah.
So does that come from a specific language, mumbo jumbo, or is that?
Yeah, mumbo jumbo. Read the etymological entry on it, because it is rooted in Africa. I grab, grammar suggested mumbo jumbo. It's like once you start reading etymology, it's amazing what you find, because sometimes words have progressed to mean totally different than what they were first invented as.
Right.
And their roots are like my favorite was I looked up weird or ESP, and I got them mixed up. And, I just started saying that weird means you have ESP. And then I looked it up, and it wasn't there. And I was like, how did I come up with that? I must say,
you're a creative etymologist.
Maybe it will mean that.
It's reverse ESP.
I'm gonna say for mine, William Shakespeare once more onto the breach.
Oh, that's good. You mean for?
I'm just gonna use that because I hear my child going, so I'm gonna go check.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So awesome. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rob. But anyways, we can close out here. I have a few comments to close out, but I want anyone to contribute anything else they want to say now. Feel free, a question or a comment or any observation.
Well, I thought it'd be fun if somebody wrote down something secretly, and then somebody else opened the wake at random and see what happened. So.
Yeah, you mean right now, Roy?
Well, why not?
Okay. So everybody's going to write down one word.
Well, or a sentence. Okay. And who wants to open shall I open it at random? After, or you open it?
We'll open it.
Okay, I'll open it mid-book. But when does the person do what they're going to do? First or after?
This is a work in progress, as the wake was. Well, why doesn't somebody write something on a piece of paper and then
everybody write 3 words on a piece of paper? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, that sounds good. Right.
Okay, I'm confused now at this point. But 3 words.
I don't even know. I have to get a pen. Hold on.
And keep in mind.
So Jerry,
go ahead, Duncan.
You had the wake there. You have the wake in front of you.
Right, but shouldn't everybody read their 3
Would you
words?
go to page 221?
Okay.
And go to the beginning of the second line. Those 3 lines, those 3 words for me.
Oh, okay. You mean the middle of the book?
Yeah. Well,
I mean the middle of page 221.
Okay, give me the first 3 words.
Time the present. Pressant.
Well,
There's some kind of noise coming through that I don't know what it is.
Yeah, but you,
221.
221 times the press. So
Oh, okay.
it's press and the word and.
Time the present. Yes.
Yeah. That's 3 good words, Duncan. Okay, now we're supposed to all have our 3 words. Everybody got them? Okay, now, Roy, do you want me to turn to any page and read a sentence? Or
I don't know
let
what we're
everybody
doing.
read their
We just
words
made up
first?
3 words, took 3 words out of the book. What did we do?
Yeah, I don't know what Duncan was doing.
I have 2 words because there's a thing. 2 words for Joyce. Moose Indian. Those were Thoreau's last words, I think.
Moose Indian? Okay.
He wanted to say something very profound, and he did, and then he went into a delirium. So his actual last 2 words were Moose Indian.
Okay.
So
No, Moose Indian is Roy's. Okay, what are your 3 words, Walter? Say it because I can't read
Atriox has fallen.
What is Atriox?
The house of Atreus. Yeah.
Okay, Atriox has fallen. Okay, Peter.
My 3 words: upgrade, dissuade, and obviate.
Oh.
Obviate. Good. Okay, and mine are Will I Am. It's the guy who sings for some rock group, but it's Will EYEM. Okay, and Duncan, what are your 3 words? Time is pressing. You're on mute.
Time is present, whatever it is, on
That's
221.
Okay. Okay, now I randomly turn to the middle of the book and I go to 344. So I'm going to read 4 lines to see if we have any correspondence. Espousing his old skinful self-tale taught him by maneuvering in open order to renew murature with the cowrods in their airish pleasantry. I think he was recovering breath from some herd squatters beyond the carcasses, and I could never to tell a liar's story, not of I knew the prize, if from lead or alimony. How's that?
I think that sums everything up. Yeah.
There we go.
Dude,
Save that. Next time someone asks you what the Finnegan's Wake is all about, just use that.
Because I did, our host Rob had to go, but I did want to read William Shakespeare in honor of the winter solstice. Take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun. I don't know what that's from, but that was pretty good. And what we just talked about, because the night is the wake and the sun is today, the winter solstice. And so the other word that we sort of delved into today is didactic, which means instruction or feeling. But what I really loved about didactic etymologically is it said effecting miracles. So Sanskrit actually says that didactic could effect miracles. And McLuhan has a great line that communication of the new is a miracle, but not impossible. So I think we proved that today, gentlemen. I really learned a lot, and there was a lot of communication of the new. So I want to thank you all.
Okay.
Good, Jerry.
Thank you, Jerry.
Take care. It's great. Yeah, thanks for setting this up.
Enjoy the longest night of the year.
Longest night. All right. Long day's journey.
We'll see you all in the wake. Fun for
Okay.
all.
Okay,
for
well,
all.
Jerry, I'll see you and Roy in the morning, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
think so. Yeah.
At the Laws of Media. Everybody
Wonderful.
else is welcome to join.
Mhm.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
guys.
bye-bye.